The radar operator reports the surface contacts at 0200 hours on October 25, 1944. Chief Petty Officer James Patterson, manning the SK air search radar aboard USS New Jersey, has detected what appears to be a major Japanese surface force emerging from San Bernardino Strait, approximately 40 miles northeast of Admiral William Halsey's Task Force 38. Halsey's fleet is steaming north chasing Japanese carriers spotted earlier. The Third Fleet's battleships, including New Jersey serving as Halsey's flagship, are the only American heavy units in the area. The force Patterson has detected is Admiral Kurita's center force. 4 battleships, including the super battleship Yamato, 6 heavy cruisers, and destroyers, heading south toward the American escort carriers off Samar in 6 hours. Those escort carriers will face the most desperate surface action in the Pacific War. Outgunned and outrun by battleships they cannot fight, saved only by their crew's courage and Japanese confusion. New Jersey will not be there. She will be 250 miles north, her 33-knot speed carrying her toward a carrier force that is bait, while the real threat steams south. But her absence from Samar, controversial and debated for decades, does not diminish her service over a career that will span 50 years, 4 wars, and establish her as the most active battleship in United States Navy history. The ship that proved battleships could remain relevant in the age of carriers by becoming fast enough to operate with them, powerful enough to provide gunfire support no aircraft could match, and survivable enough to return to service 3 separate times when conventional wisdom declared battleships obsolete. USS New Jersey was an Iowa-class fast battleship, the ultimate expression of American battleship design. The Iowa class originated in late 1930s, planning for war with Japan. American naval strategy assumed that decisive battle would occur in the Western Pacific after Japanese forces attacked American possessions. This battle would require fast battleships capable of crossing the Pacific, operating with carrier task forces, and engaging Japanese battleships in gun duels. The design that emerged balanced speed, firepower, armor, and range in proportions that defined modern battleship construction. Specifications: displacement 45,000 tons standard, 58,000 tons full load, length 887 feet, beam 108 feet, draft 38 feet. The hull was long and narrow, optimized for speed. Armament: 9 16-inch 50 caliber guns and 3 triple turrets, 25-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns, numerous 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft weapons. Armor: 12.1-inch belt, 17.3-inch turret faces, 7.5-inch deck over magazines. The armor scheme was designed to resist 16-inch shells at ranges from 20,000 to 30,000 yards. The expected battle range: maximum speed 33 knots, faster than any previous American battleship and fast enough to keep pace with fleet carriers. This was the critical specification. Carriers required speed to launch and recover aircraft, turning into the wind at 25 to 30 knots. Battleships that could not maintain that speed could not screen carriers effectively. The Iowa class could sustain 33 knots for extended periods, making them ideal carrier escorts. Range: 15,000 nautical miles at 15 knots. This allowed Pacific operations without constant refueling. The ships could cross from Pearl Harbor to forward bases, operate for extended periods, and return without excessive logistics support. Crew varied between 2,400 and 2,700 depending on configuration and flagstaff requirements. New Jersey was laid down at Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in September 1940, launched in December 1942, and commissioned in May 1943. Her first captain was Carl F. Holden. The ship completed workup and training through summer 1943, then departed for the Pacific in January 1944. She arrived at Funafuti in the Marshall Islands in January, joining Admiral Raymond Spruance's Fifth Fleet. Her initial missions were routine: screening carriers during strikes on Japanese positions, conducting shore bombardment, providing anti-aircraft defense for the task force. But in April 1944, Admiral Halsey selected New Jersey as flagship for Third Fleet, the designation Fifth Fleet received when Halsey commanded. Halsey chose New Jersey for specific reasons. She was the newest Iowa-class battleship. Her systems were most modern, and she had space for the large staff required for fleet command. Her speed allowed her to position anywhere in the task force quickly. Her communications equipment could coordinate operations across hundreds of ships and thousands of aircraft, and her 16-inch guns, while rarely used against surface targets, provided reassurance that the fleet had heavy firepower if needed. The alternating fleet designation, 5th Fleet under Spruance and 3rd Fleet under Halsey, was administrative convenience that confused Japanese intelligence. The same ships operated under both designations, but Japanese analysts counted them as separate forces, inflating estimates of American naval strength. New Jersey served as flagship for both admirals at different times, but she became most associated with Halsey, whose aggressive style matched the battleship's capabilities. The fast carrier task forces of 1944 and 45 operated at tempo that would have been impossible earlier in the war. They conducted strikes across thousands of miles of ocean, hitting targets from the Philippines to Japan itself, withdrawing before Japanese forces could respond, then hitting again days later at different locations. This required ships that could sustain high speed for days, that could refuel at sea, that could maintain operations continuously without port visits. New Jersey met these requirements. Her role was protection and command. She positioned herself near the carriers, providing anti-aircraft defense with her 5-inch and 40mm guns. Her radar detected incoming aircraft at long range, giving the task force warning time. Her communications allowed Halsey to coordinate strikes, direct fighter cover, and manage the complex ballet of launching and recovering aircraft from multiple carriers while the task force maneuvered at speed. But battleships existed primarily to fight other battleships, and by 1944, opportunities for gun duels were rare. Japanese battleships remained in port or operated cautiously, aware that American carriers could destroy them before they closed to gun range. The few times Japanese surface forces sortied, they did so as part of complex plans designed to separate American carriers from their escorts, creating opportunities for surface action. The Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 was such a plan. The Japanese Show One Go operation called for using carriers as bait to draw Halsey's carriers north, while surface forces would transit San Bernardino Strait and Surigao Strait to converge on the American landing beaches at Leyte. If successful, the plan would annihilate American amphibious forces and potentially change the strategic situation in the Philippines. Halsey's carriers were operating off the Philippines, supporting the Leyte landings. When reports arrived of Japanese carrier forces approaching from the north, Halsey's instinct was offensive. Attack the carriers before they could threaten American forces. He ordered Task Force 38 to steam north at maximum speed. New Jersey and the other fast battleships, organized as Task Force 34, accompanied the carriers. What Halsey did not know, what his intelligence had not confirmed, was whether Admiral Kurita's center force, which had been spotted transiting the Sibuyan Sea on October 24th, was still operational. American aircraft had attacked the force heavily, sinking the battleship Musashi and damaging other ships. Halsey assumed the force had been neutralized or had withdrawn. He assumed the carriers to the north were the primary threat, but Kurita's force had not withdrawn. It had turned around temporarily to avoid further air attack, then resumed course toward San Bernardino Strait. At midnight on October 24th to 25th, it transited the strait and emerged into the Philippine Sea. Heading south toward Samar, where the American escort carriers of Taffy 3 were supporting landing operations. The controversy centers on what happened next. Admiral Thomas Kinkaid, commanding 7th Fleet supporting the Leyte landings, assumed Halsey had left battleships to guard San Bernardino Strait. Halsey assumed Kinkaid's 7th Fleet was covering the strait. Neither assumption was correct. San Bernardino Strait was unguarded. Chief Patterson's radar contact at 0200 hours was Kurita's force emerging from the strait. The contact was reported to Halsey, but by that time, New Jersey was over 200 miles north, steaming at 25 knots toward the Japanese carriers. Turning back would take hours. The escort carriers off Samar would have to fight alone. The battle off Samar that followed was desperate. The escort carriers, each displacing about 10,000 tons with maximum speed of 17 knots, faced battleships displacing over 70,000 tons capable of over 30 knots. The carriers' escorts, destroyers and destroyer escorts, attacked with torpedoes and suicide runs that bought time but could not prevent the Japanese from closing range. Shells from 18-inch and 14-inch guns fell around the carriers. Some carriers were hit. 1. USS Gambier Bay was sunk, but the Japanese withdrew. Kurita, confused by aggressive American destroyer attacks, worried about American carrier aircraft that might appear at any moment, and uncertain about his mission's strategic value. Ordered retreat at 0920 hours. The escort carriers survived. The decision to withdraw would haunt Korea and Japanese naval history. But from American perspective, the outcome was successful if costly. The invasion forces at Leyte were protected. The Japanese fleet had been turned back. New Jersey and Task Force 38 engaged the Japanese carriers to the north. The carriers, part of Admiral Ozawa's decoy force, had minimal aircraft aboard. They were sacrificial pieces, intended to draw American carriers away from Leyte. They succeeded. Halsey's aircraft attacked throughout October 25th, sinking 4 carriers, but the attacks did not involve New Jersey directly. Her role was escorting the carriers conducting the strikes, providing anti-aircraft defense, and serving as Halsey's command post. The controversy over Halsey's decision persists. Critics argue he fell for the Japanese bait, left San Bernardino Strait unguarded, and nearly caused disaster at Samar. Defenders argue he made reasonable assumptions based on available intelligence, that his responsibility was destroying Japanese naval power, not guarding straits, and that the outcome vindicated his decisions. The debate is unresolvable because it depends on counterfactuals. What would have happened if Halsey had split his forces? If Korea had pressed his attack? If the Japanese plan had succeeded? What is clear is that New Jersey's speed made Halsey's decision possible. If the battleships had been slower, unable to keep pace with carriers, Halsey would have been forced to leave them behind, reducing his striking power against the Japanese carriers. New Jersey's 33 knots allowed her to accompany the carriers, providing the heavy firepower that might be needed if Japanese battleships appeared. The fact that such combat did not occur does not mean the capability was irrelevant. Post-Leyte Gulf, New Jersey continued operations with the fast carrier task forces. She participated in strikes against Formosa, the Philippines, and Okinawa through late 1944 and early 1945. In December 1944, she was caught in Typhoon Cobra, which destroyed 3 destroyers and damaged multiple ships. New Jersey's size and stability allowed her to ride out the storm with minimal damage, though the experience was terrifying for her crew. In 1945, New Jersey participated in the campaigns against Iwo Jima and Okinawa, providing shore bombardment and anti-aircraft defense. Her 16-inch guns, each firing a 2,700-pound armor-piercing shell or 1,900-pound high-explosive shell to a range of 23 miles, could destroy targets that aircraft could not effectively engage. Fortified positions, concrete bunkers, and command centers that required multiple bomb hits to destroy could be eliminated with a single 16-inch shell. The shore bombardment role demonstrated battleship value in the carrier age. Aircraft were flexible, could strike targets across wide areas, and could operate against moving targets. But they carried limited ordnance, required time to locate and identify targets, and could not operate in all weather conditions. Battleships provided sustained firepower that could be applied continuously regardless of weather, that could destroy hardened targets requiring heavy shells, and that could support troops ashore with accuracy that improved as fire control developed. New Jersey fired thousands of 16-inch shells during shore bombardment missions. Each shell represented resources: the shell itself, the powder charge, the barrel wear that required eventual replacement, but the effect was undeniable. Marines landing at Iwo Jima credited naval gunfire with suppressing Japanese defenses during the critical initial hours. Soldiers fighting on Okinawa called for fire support when encountering positions they could not reduce with available weapons. The battleships provided that support, becoming artillery platforms for forces ashore. The war ended in August 1945 with New Jersey in home waters, preparing for the invasion of Japan that never came. She entered Tokyo Bay on September 17th, witnessing the formal surrender that had occurred weeks earlier on the battleship Missouri. Her war service had lasted 19 months, January 1944 to September 1945. In that time, she had steamed over 200,000 miles, operated with fast carriers from the Marshall Islands to Japan, served as flagship for the Third Fleet's most aggressive operations, and established her reputation as the ship that could go anywhere at any speed. Post-war, New Jersey was decommissioned in June 1948 and placed in reserve. The battleship age was over. Conventional wisdom stated carriers had proven decisive. Guided missiles would replace guns. Large gunships were obsolete, but New Jersey's story was not finished. The Korean War began in June 1950. American forces supported South Korean defenders against North Korean invasion. Air power and ground forces were engaged immediately, but the mountainous terrain, limited road network, and enemy positions in caves and bunkers required firepower that aircraft could not consistently provide. Naval gunfire support became critical. The Pacific Fleet had several old battleships in reserve, but they lacked the speed and range for extended operations. New Jersey was recommissioned in November 1950. She arrived off Korea in May 1951 and began shore bombardment missions supporting United Nations forces. Her 16-inch guns fired on North Korean positions, supply lines, and infrastructure. The effects were substantial. Railroads were destroyed. Bridges collapsed. Command posts were demolished. Enemy forces learned to fear the sound of 16-inch shells, distinctive rumbling that gave seconds of warning before impact. The Korean War demonstrated that shore bombardment remained relevant. The missions were unglamorous, steaming slowly parallel to shore, firing at coordinates provided by spotters, adjusting fire based on observed impacts. But the results were measurable. Enemy positions destroyed. Friendly forces supported. Tactical objectives achieved. New Jersey remained on station for 6 months, firing thousands of shells, before returning to the United States for maintenance. She was decommissioned again in August 1957, her machinery worn from 7 years of post-war service. The interval between Korean War service and Vietnam reactivation lasted over a decade. Technology advanced. Guided missiles became standard. Nuclear power was introduced. The battleship age seemed definitively over. But the Vietnam War created demand for naval gunfire that aircraft could not satisfy. Close air support required clear weather and positive target identification. Naval gunfire could be delivered in poor visibility, controlled by ground spotters, and sustained continuously regardless of aircraft availability. In December 1967, the decision was made to reactivate New Jersey for Vietnam service. The reactivation was controversial. Critics argued that resources spent on a battleship would be better invested in modern systems. Supporters argued that no weapon system could match 16-inch guns for shore bombardment. New Jersey was modernized with updated electronics, improved communications, and enhanced crew spaces. She recommissioned in April 1968 and deployed to Vietnam in September. Her Vietnam service lasted 9 months, September 1968 to March 1969. She fired over 6,000 rounds of 16-inch ammunition and 15,000 rounds of 5-inch ammunition, supporting American and South Vietnamese forces throughout her deployment. Effectiveness was difficult to quantify. Shore bombardment did not win battles visibly the way airstrikes or ground combat did, but friendly forces consistently requested fire support, suggesting they found it valuable. The most controversial aspect was civilian casualties. 16-inch shells were imprecise compared to modern guided weapons. Aiming errors could place shells hundreds of meters from intended impact points. In densely populated areas, this meant risk of civilian casualties. American forces attempted to minimize this through careful target selection and forward observer control. But some civilian casualties occurred, creating political complications and moral questions about using such weapons in counterinsurgency warfare. New Jersey was decommissioned in December 1969. Her Vietnam service concluded. The war would continue for 6 more years without her. The political environment had turned against battleship reactivation. The cost, the crew requirements, the symbolic nature of using World War II-era weapons in modern conflict, all argued against continued service. But the story continued. The 1980s saw renewed interest in battleships under the Reagan administration's 600-ship Navy plan. The argument was deterrence. Reactivated battleships with modern missiles would provide visible power projection capability. New Jersey and her sisters were modernized with Tomahawk cruise missiles, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and improved electronics. New Jersey recommissioned in December 1982. Her 1980 service included operations off Lebanon in 1983 and 1984, where she conducted shore bombardment supporting multinational peacekeeping forces. The effectiveness was questionable. The targets were difficult to identify and the political situation was complex, but the missions demonstrated continued capability to provide fire support in limited war scenarios. She participated in exercises, port visits, and presence missions through the mid-1980s. But by 1989, the Cold War was ending and defense budgets were declining. The battleships, expensive to operate and crew-intensive, were early candidates for decommissioning. New Jersey was decommissioned in February 1991, shortly before the Gulf War, where her sister ship USS Missouri and USS Wisconsin provided gunfire support. Her final decommissioning was permanent. She was stricken from the Naval Register in 1995 and became a museum ship in Camden, New Jersey. In 2001, her career had lasted, across 4 commissionings, 50 years. She had served in 3 wars: World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, plus peacetime operations in the 1980s. She had fired more 16-inch shells than any other Iowa-class battleship. She had steamed more miles, operated in more theaters, and remained active longer than any battleship in history. The statistics across her career were remarkable. Approximately 250,000 miles steamed, over 21,000 rounds of 16-inch ammunition fired, thousands of 5-inch shells, crew totaling over 10,000 individuals who served aboard her at various points during 4 commissionings. 0 losses to enemy action across 50 years. She was shot at in Korea and Vietnam, took near misses, but never sustained significant damage from enemy fire. The Black Dragon nickname came from Japanese recognition of her distinctive appearance in aggressive operations. Dark camouflage in World War II made her stand out among the fleet. Her speed and firepower made her dangerous. Japanese forces learned to recognize her profile and anticipate her presence meant heavy action. The nickname stuck, used by her own crew with pride. The question of battleship relevance in the missile age remains debated. Critics point out that modern precision-guided weapons can achieve effects that required 16-inch shells, with less risk and cost. Supporters note that no missile system can match the sustained firepower of battleship guns. That shore bombardment remains relevant. That visible power projection has political value. Both sides have valid points. The reality is that battleships remained useful in specific scenarios, but not useful enough to justify their costs compared to alternatives. New Jersey's 50-year career proved that ships properly maintained can remain effective far beyond their expected service lives. The Iowa class was designed in the late 1930s for a war that began in 1941. That war ended in 1945. But the ships designed for that war remained capable through Korea in the 1950s, Vietnam in the 1960s, and Lebanon in the 1980s. The fundamental capabilities, speed, firepower, protection, remained relevant even as technology advanced around them. At 0200 hours on October 25, 1944, Chief Patterson detected Japanese battleships that New Jersey would not engage. The detection was important. The report went up the chain. But the decision that mattered was made by Halsey based on strategic considerations that transcended any individual contact. New Jersey's role was carrying the admiral, providing the platform for command, steaming wherever needed at whatever speed required. That role, being the ship that could go anywhere and do anything, defined her service across 50 years. She operated with fast carriers in World War II, providing protection and command capability. She bombarded shore positions in Korea, providing firepower that ground forces needed. She returned for Vietnam, demonstrating that old ships could still serve new needs. And she came back again in the 1980s, showing that battleships still had symbolic and practical value even in the missile age. The longest-serving battleship in history survived not because she was most powerful or most modern, but because she was most flexible. Her speed allowed her to operate with carriers when carriers dominated naval warfare. Her guns allowed her to provide shore bombardment when ground forces needed support. Her size allowed her to carry modern missiles when missiles became standard weapons. She adapted to changing requirements across 50 years, proving that good design properly maintained can outlast predictions of obsolescence. The Black Dragon's legacy is not single battle or dramatic engagement. She was present at Leyte Gulf but did not fight the gun duel she was built for. She bombarded Korea and Vietnam, but the results were tactical, not strategic. She carried Tomahawks in the 1980s, but never fired them in combat. Her legacy is endurance, serving across 5 decades, 3 wars, and 4 commissionings, demonstrating that the best ships are not those built for specific wars, but those designed with enough capability and flexibility to remain relevant as wars and technology change. 50 years of service, 13 battle stars across 3 wars, over 21,000 rounds fired, and a museum in Camden where visitors can see the ship that proved battleships could survive the age of carriers by being fast enough to operate with them, powerful enough to support forces ashore, and adaptable enough to remain useful long after conventional wisdom declared them obsolete.